Cornfu here. This week I'm going to be illustrating a baby Yoda using Illustrator from a previous sketch that I made in honor of the Mandalorian Season 2 being released, which is super awesome. I love that show. So the tools I'm going to be using are the width tool, the shape builder tool, and the pen curvature tool. Normally I would use the regular pen tool, but the pen curvature tool is pretty cool. I'm going to actually be illustrating some noodles because baby Yoda apparently loves noodles. So let's jump into this sucker and get going. Okay, first thing, take your sketch, scan it in, phone, scanner, whatever, bring it into Illustrator. I grabbed the pen curvature tool, which is similar to the curvature tool, or the pen tool, except that it automatically makes common curves, like the most smooth curves that you could possibly get mathematically. So I'm drawing the center line of my noodles, building those out, and trying to get a good sweep. And I'm trying not to use a ton of points. I'm using just enough points to get the right curvature. Now, if I was to use the regular pen tool, there's a lot of clicking, holding, and dragging, which I actually prefer to do. But for speed, the pen curvature tool for me really works really well. Okay, now I'm going to add some thickness to the strokes that I just made. And I'm going to change the color so I can actually see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to set the opacity down a little bit so I can actually see through. Because what we're going to do is the noodles are overlapping, so we have to do a little bit of cutting and splicing to make them look like they're overlapping. Some pieces are in front, some pieces are behind. Okay, now I've grabbed the width tool, which is Shift W. That allows me to grab a point or anywhere on the spline and then drag it, which will thicken it or thin it depending on which direction you drag. Now, if you hold down the Option key, it's a modifier key. This is a pro tip. It will let you resize the handle on either side. So when you use the width tool and you grab it and you drag it, it'll expand it from center out. So if you hold down the Option key, you can drag on the right side and thin it up, or drag on the left side and thin it up. It's kind of hard for me to explain. It's better just to jump in and try it out. Okay, now I'm going to outline. Well, actually, I simplify the path. There's too many points. And I want to make sure that the curves, the points are all curves. Because this is a noodle, this is not angular. You want it to be a really nice, smooth sweep. Now, if you notice when I click some of the points, they get highlighted because they're selected. Some of them are angular. You can see that the Bezier handles are pointed at different angles. They're not together, they're not parallel. So when you do that, at the top bar, you'll see a thing that allows you to either make the curvature an angle or curved. And you basically are converting the point to one or the other. So that's what I did there. Again, tweaking, moving it around, trying to get it to fit as closely to the sketch as possible. Now, it looks a little crowded right here. That's okay. I'm going to move the points out just a little bit so they don't overlap too much, because you want to be able to have a clean sweep of seeing the whole piece of the noodle sweep up behind or in front of another noodle. So you don't want them too jammed together. Then it's visually difficult. So now I'm using the shape builder tool. Now, if you notice, it highlights when I drag over, and that's showing you which pieces I'm connecting together. So I'm trying to figure out which pieces. I'm looking at my sketch below. That's why I have a transparency set, so I can actually see how they overlap, if it's in the front or if it's in the back. Now, if you notice right there, it kind of merged two pieces together that I really don't need to have together. I actually need it to be separated, or else it kills the illusion of depth. I'll go back and fix that manually. I just want to get the main pieces all unified. And by unified, if a piece is in the front and it overlaps another piece, it needs to be all seamless and not have any cuts through it. If it's behind, vice versa. Now I select it all and I change it to full saturation with a black outline, so it's easier for me to visually see if I did it correctly or not. And I delete the little teeny inner pieces, the islands. Shape builder tool will actually respect those. So if you drag over that, it'll actually merge that with your other shapes. What I'm doing now is manually putting in some lines that I'm going to then use to slice through the pieces that have been unified. And by unified, if you have two separate pieces and you've sliced them, if you unify them together, it makes it into one piece. It merges them together, basically. So I draw a line that kind of slices. I kind of eyeball it there. I select that line, and then I select the piece that is together. I use the shape, or the Pathfinder. Pathfinder lets you merge pieces, divide pieces, punch pieces through, a bunch of stuff. It's one of my tools I used to use all the time before the shape builder tool. So I separate that out. So now I have a pretty good overlapped noodle piece. I go back in and I pick a second noodle, and I'm going to do the same exact process. The reason I didn't do all the noodles together at the same time is visually it melts your mind. There's just too many things to keep track of, so I just build it in pieces. More noodles means, you know, you should probably separate them out a little bit more. Again, you can see as I use the shape builder tool and I drag over selected pieces, it merges them together. You also notice that it's making 1 trillion extra points. We'll fix that later. Okay. Now it gets a little tricky here because I have a piece that's coming from behind and then lapping over top. I have to go back and I'll manually fix that as well. And for that, I use the pen tool. Now, you'll notice too, once I start outlining and merging stuff together, inside the islands, there's pieces that are there that you can't see. If you were to select all of it and merge it all together, it would just be one solid piece. I go in and I get rid of those little teeny pieces that you can't see. Like, well, I'm not doing it yet. Here, I'm separating it out. Now, you'll notice that my stroke is kind of hanging over into that open island. I just selected that. And then I do select fill color, same, and it'll select everything that's that same fill color. So if it has no fill color, it'll select everything that doesn't have a fill color. Then I can delete it that way. I get rid of it. It sounds really confusing. Okay, I'm pretty happy. So now I'm going to go back up to the head and I'm going to start drawing in the shape. This is the regular pen tool. If you just hit P, that pops up. Again, there's a bunch of modifier keys. If you hit P, you're using the pen tool. If you hold down Option, you get some alternate like selection type things. Just experiment with it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, I'm dragging out the shape. I'm going to go in and add some width to the stroke. And I'll have some pieces that kind of overlap. I'm trying to mimic kind of a comic book style with the thin and thick ink lines that always come to a taper. Okay, now, like I said, I'm going to add some thickness to this. Hope I missed a piece. Could add some thickness to all of those. I think standard issue was like 12. That looked like a good size. Now, again, I'm using the width tool. I'm dragging points I'm dragging ends to a point. And now here I'm using Option modifier tool to slide one side or the other side independently. Because you don't want to always expand it out from the center. Sometimes that gives you too weird of an angle, so you can actually drag one side and it looks a little bit better. Okay, adding some various thicknesses and thinness to this. Now, once I have it where I'm pretty happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and select it all, and then I will outline that stroke. I don't think there's a shortcut for outlining a stroke or expanding it, which is a shame because I use that a lot. Okay, Option dragging that handle, selecting it all, path, outline stroke. And then I use simplify a lot because a lot of times when you convert something, it adds a ton of extra points, and I want to have a visually more smooth thing. So if I have 1,000 points, I start deleting points, it gets all jagged. If I had less points, then it maintains the smoothness. Now you see there, I just merged the whole thing turned black. That's because I accidentally selected those internal islands. That means there's a piece in there that has no color, but it's still a piece. It's still considered a piece. So you have to watch out for that. Okay, now I have the whole thing drawn out, little fast forward there, and I'm going to duplicate that because that's my ink layer, my outside outline layer. I'm going to duplicate that, and then I'm going to separate it out, which is Shift Option Command 8. That breaks apart all the pieces. So then that outer layer, I'm going to move to its own layer. I'm going to consider that my outside back layer. I'm going to change it to a different color so I can see it, move it back, lock it, and now that gives me the internal pieces that I'm going to now colorize. Now, if I was in Photoshop, I would use the paint bucket or just manually paint it in. With Illustrator, you can separate out those and then they're just solid color blocks. I go in and color. Here, I have some extra details that I deleted, but I decide, you know what, I'm going to go back and add those back in because I need those pieces there so I can offset it and do light and dark. My back color is dark, my front color is light. It gives that highlight, that kind of fake highlight. Okay, and I delete some of the extra pieces that I don't need. So now I have these little solid islands that I can then go in and colorize. Now here I change that to brown, but it shows up as black. That's because it's still considered grayscale. If you go up into your color palette, there's a little hamburger menu that you can click on, and it drops down and lets you pick CMYK if you're doing print, RGB if you're doing digital. I make it RGB. Okay, now I've just offset the path. So I select an island, I hit offset, and I make it a negative number. So it basically will offset at whatever pixel or number I set it to, and it kind of cuts it inward. Then I can use this, and now I'll go and reshape it to have highlighted areas and then shadow areas. Now look, this is probably not the best way to do it. Technically, I could go in and draw the shadows in by hand. For me, this is a little bit quicker. Then I go and I start deleting pieces till I think it looks right, if it looks like a shaded area. Like right now, it's a little trippy looking, but as you start to move pieces around, I'll have like the ridge of Baby Yoda's head, and then that'll kick a shadow back. I haven't really picked a light source for this. This is just kind of like a cartoony, make it up as you go. Normally I would pick a light source and I say, okay, all my shadows are going to be kicked off to the side. My highlights will be here. I'm not going to do that. This is just kind of more a frontal view. I didn't want this piece to be overly complicated. The point of this is to show you some of the tools that I use to make vector art. And there is no right way or wrong way. There's the way that works best for you. There may be a super efficient way to do this that I'm not doing, and feel free to leave comments below if you're like, hey, why don't you try this? I'm more than happy to try a different way if it works quicker. Again, I select this piece, there's 1,000 points, so I go ahead and simplify it. It still maintains the shape. Now you can oversimplify it and then it'll kind of break the shape, but you can generally trust the default setting of simplify. I pick a color, now I'm going to add in a highlight. Again, using the pen tool, and then I'm going to use the width tool to thicken up the main beefy part of the highlight. This is more of a graphic style of a highlight. I didn't use any gradients or anything. I just had like little solid pieces that are brighter than the actual main color. Sharpening up those endpoints. Zooming out to say, hey, yeah, that highlight's a little too close to the edge. Let me move that back a little bit of tweaking. There's always a lot of tweaking in this thing. And so I'll do this for another hour, and then I end up with the final piece, which pretty happy with. Baby Yoda slurping on some noodles. So hope you enjoyed. I hope this is helpful. If you have some suggestions of a better way to do this, I'm all ears. And also, if this was helpful for you, please leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.